5 months in, I'm sacrificing everything for her bipolar disorder. I'm afraid, can love survive this emotional roller coaster? I never imagined I would enter a relationship with someone significantly younger than myself, particularly with a partner who has to manage the emotional ups and downs of bipolar disorder. However, destiny had different intentions. Now, after 5 months, I find myself questioning whether love alone is truly sufficient. My girlfriend frequently oscillates between being extraordinarily sweet and abruptly becoming distant, cold, or even overtly angry, often raising her voice inexplicably. There are times when we are chatting casually on the phone, and then out of the blue, she goes mute and hangs up. In the end, it's always me who ends up saying sorry. I have invested numerous hours comforting and reassuring her, even when I am struggling, because if I don't, the situation could be even more challenging the following day. I'm not idly waiting around, I'm making an effort, and to be honest, this is the most dedication I have ever put into a relationship. My sleep schedule is completely disrupted because I stay awake just to ensure she falls asleep first. If I inadvertently doze off before she does, she becomes upset. Yet when she drifts off while we are talking, I never voice any complaints. I have imparted a great deal of knowledge to her, offering insights based on my experiences. Even her current career path is influenced by what I have taught her. She seeks companionship, wants to engage in games, needs someone to listen, and requires assistance with assignments, and I consistently strive to be present for her. I never turn her down. Even when her requests are challenging or inconvenient, I always respond with, "I will do my best," and I genuinely make an effort to fulfill those requests. I have changed significantly for her. I have stopped drinking, given up smoking, and even distanced myself from longtime friends who she believed were negative influences. I put her needs above my own. I share this not to seek recognition or anticipate anything in return. I simply wish to convey the immense love I feel for her. I work from home as a programmer, and my job requires concentration, yet my work is frequently interrupted. This impacts my performance and evaluations, and at times, I find myself working additional hours to compensate for lost productivity. However, I do it willingly just to ensure that I am always available for her when she needs someone. It has never felt burdensome. If it is for her, I don't mind. Before this relationship, I experienced several others where I maintained clear boundaries. If someone disrespected me through yelling, dishonesty, or making me feel undervalued, I walked away without second thoughts. I respected myself and understood that there were people out there who would treat me well. But with her, I have shown patience. I tolerate everything. She ignores me, raises her voice at me, and at times brings me to tears, an experience I have never had in any previous relationship. Yet, I choose to stay. I convinced myself that her actions were typical behavior for a woman, maybe mere mood swings or a consequence of our age difference. I tried to adapt, but it constantly felt unfair and painful. Still, I believed this was simply a part of love and sacrifice. I reassured myself that love necessitates sacrifice, and I was willing to invest more effort. In the 4th month of our relationship, I accompanied her to a psychiatrist's appointment where she received a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Rather than leaving, I committed to supporting her. The thought of walking away never even entered my mind. I have devoted countless hours to reading, watching, and learning about bipolar disorder, seeking to comprehend how challenging it is and the incredible strength it requires to live with it. I have tried to empathize with her, and it pains me to think about how much she struggles. I cannot shake the feeling that she is not capable enough to face this world on her own. Currently, I believe I am the only one who is genuinely present for her, the only one who cares and offers unwavering support. However, as time has gone by, I have started to feel increasingly drained. I'm uncertain if it is due to the diagnosis, but it seems she now rationalizes her actions by saying, "I can't control it, I am unwell." I feel as though I need to justify this too, thinking, she is unwell, so I must accept these behaviors. If I don't, it seems like I am not being understanding enough. There are moments when we are laughing and enjoying ourselves, but then in the next instant, she might go completely silent, ignore me, or react with anger. She utters words that wound me deeply, making me feel like all my efforts are in vain. Nevertheless, I dedicate hours to uplifting her mood. At times, it proves effective. Other times, no matter what I do, she remains upset. If I endure silently, continue to support her in lifting her spirits, and never express my true feelings, then after she becomes angry suddenly or distant, she eventually recognizes her behavior and apologizes, sometimes even to the point of tears. She expresses that she doesn't want to behave this way, that she feels regret, and promises to work on it, committing to treating me better. I can see that her apologies are sincere and that she never intends to act like this. I always reassure her, "It's okay, I comprehend your situation. What matters is your willingness to improve." Recently, I find myself feeling perpetually anxious when conversing with her. Even during our best moments when we are sharing laughter and stories, and everything appears perfect, there remains a persistent anxiety that she might abruptly shut down or lash out, as though a switch has been flipped. There is no trigger, no apparent reason, just a sudden change that leaves me scrambling to comprehend what went wrong. When I inquire about her feelings, hoping to provide support or alleviate the situation, she simply replies, "Nothing." Yet I sense that it is not nothing. I can feel it. I just am at a loss for how to connect with her. Now, I feel as though I can no longer be my true self around her. I find myself filtering every word, doubting every sentence, simply to avoid provoking an outburst. It is exhausting to continually walk this invisible tightrope, never knowing when the entire situation may collapse. Even something I once found enjoyable, playing games with her, has lost its charm. When we engage in competitive gameplay, she becomes frustrated if things do not go her way. If our team doesn't win, she gets upset. Although she doesn't direct her frustration towards me, her entire attitude shifts, which influences our communication. She struggles to handle losing, and during matches, she continually instructs me on what to do, even though, in terms of skill, we are worlds apart. In fact, I am a professional player. Nevertheless, I remain silent and adhere to her directions. When she encounters difficulties, her mood alters in an instant, and suddenly, it feels as though everything is my fault. I am the one who must apologize, repair the situation, and pull her back from the brink even when I am grappling with my challenges. I try to assist, offer solutions, and be the support she needs, but often, my efforts seem to aggravate her even further. No matter my attempts, I end up feeling like a failure, like a partner who is never adequate. When she is in a stable state, she is remarkably sweet and an incredibly wonderful person. She is caring, considerate, and affectionate. She jokes, surprises me with thoughtful gestures, reminds me of things I might forget, gives me gifts, sings for me, listens to me, and engages in countless actions that make me feel genuinely loved, experiences I have never encountered before. In those moments, I feel immensely fortunate to have her. She does not just care, she genuinely looks out for me in ways that feel both protective and deeply affectionate. If I neglect to check in before going out, she becomes anxious, her mind racing with the worst possible scenarios, sometimes breaking down in tears. She consistently reminds me to eat regularly, take care of my health, and rest adequately. The thought of losing me terrifies her. She would weep endlessly if anything happened to me. Honestly, witnessing how much I mean to her, how dearly she values me, makes my love for her even stronger. She has never exhibited questionable behavior. She does not cheat, engage in bad habits, break the law, or go against social or cultural standards. In truth, she approaches life with seriousness. She works hard, studies diligently, takes part in popular organizations, volunteers for charitable causes, and spends her time focusing on positive pursuits. Aside from her unpredictable mood shifts, she is truly a positive individual. Before she received her diagnosis, we had meaningful discussions about marriage. We both felt confident about our shared future. As I grow older, I no longer wish to keep searching. I desire to establish a life with someone. In my heart, she is that individual. She is the person I envision a future with. I love her immensely, and I yearn to stand by her side. Yet if this is how our life together will always be, I find myself fearful. I claim to prioritize her above all else, but I cannot help but feel pity for myself. If this is the nature of our future life together, will I be able to endure? TLDR, I am in a relationship for 5 months with someone much younger who lives with bipolar disorder. I have invested my heart and soul into this relationship, sacrificing my own well-being to support her. I have sacrificed time, energy, work, sleep, habits, and friendships, always prioritizing her needs. She fluctuates between being incredibly loving and suddenly becoming distant, angry, or shutting me out without notice. Regardless of the situation, I am consistently the one who apologizes, comforts her, and strives to make everything right even when I am struggling. Since her diagnosis, I have done my utmost to understand and exhibit patience. However, I am exhausted. I tread carefully, second-guessing every word, afraid of triggering a sudden change in her mood. When she is stable, she is caring, affectionate, and deeply loving, expressing feelings I've never known before. But when things go awry, it seems I am the only one keeping everything intact. We once discussed marriage, and I still desire a future with her, but if this is the reality of our life together, can I withstand it? Thank you for reading this message. I genuinely appreciate it. I would love to hear from those who have had similar experiences. Has anyone navigated a relationship like this successfully? Is there a way to protect my heart while loving fully? Any insight would be greatly valued. Story 2. I reunited with my long-lost childhood friend, fell in love, got heartbroken, then watched him choose someone else. WTF. I have been composing this for a considerable time and believe it is finally the right moment to share it. It all started during the last academic year in my physical education class. I encountered a young man. I felt as though I recognized him, as if we had known each other previously, but there was something unsettling about him. I could not quite pinpoint what it was, but eventually I convinced myself to initiate a conversation with him. It was then that I discovered we had actually been friends in the 3rd grade. Naturally, I informed him of this, and we developed a connection over the revelation. As time went by, I found myself developing feelings for him. I felt secure in his presence, and I derived comfort from him. I introduced him to one of my friends, Days, and the 3 of us formed a small group. We created a group chat on Snapchat, through which we communicated daily. Eventually, I revealed to Days the true reason behind my introduction of him to her. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse when Days confessed that she had feelings for him too. I felt heartbroken and betrayed by my closest friend, yet I tried to convince myself that nothing would come of it, considering they had never met in real life before. That all changed when Jesse also came to me and expressed that he liked her back. At that point, both of them were aware of my feelings for him, but they made their choices and started dating. I wanted to be happy for both of them, but I could not summon the ability to be joyful for their relationship. I was envious. I was torn between wanting my friends to be happy and my own jealousy. I regret some of my actions during this time, although I used my jealousy as an excuse to justify my behavior. I ceased communication with my best friend, and as for Jesse, I also ended our friendship. I am not typically someone who is comfortable with vulnerability. I usually do not allow the opinions of others to affect my own feelings, yet I felt profoundly conflicted and found myself crying for both of them. All of this occurred in October 2023. However, in December 2023, Days and I began speaking again. We gradually rebuilt our friendship and became inseparable once more. I forgave her, and she forgave me. She has been there for me ever since. Then, Jesse and I started communicating again after everything that had transpired between us. I forgave him, and he forgave me. This established the dynamic of our friendship, a constant cycle of forgiveness that never seemed to end. As the next semester commenced, we quickly became close again, as if we had never missed a beat in each other's lives. Jesse introduced me to some of his friends during lunch, and I greeted them warmly. It was around this time that Jesse informed me he had a girlfriend. At the moment, I did not think much of it, mainly because I had buried all the feelings I once had for him. I did not want to fall into that emotional trap again, so I suppressed my emotions. Eventually, as is the case with the passing school year, everything changed. Jesse and I maintained contact through messages on Discord, Snapchat, and Instagram, which were the primary means of communication for most people. We began staying up late chatting with one another. We formed a closer bond than ever. Then one evening, he confessed his feelings. He admitted that he had liked me for a long time, but had refrained from saying anything due to his relationship. He uttered that he had harbored feelings for me for a while. I was taken aback and genuinely confused. It was difficult to believe him because I knew he often tended to be dramatic and at times, perhaps even silly. However, he managed to convince me that he was being sincere. The following morning, he reiterated his feelings. Finally, all the repressed emotions I had stored inside broke free, and I realized I loved him. However, he was unable to make a decision, which hurt me deeply. I suffered emotionally, yet he seemed indifferent. He professed his love for me, but being with him felt like navigating a bed of needles. Eventually, I reached a breaking point, and I told him he needed to make a choice. I said it was either me or his girlfriend. He was hesitant to choose between us, but ultimately, he chose his girlfriend. That was his one true love, and that choice caused me immense pain. I needed some time to process everything, so I walked away. Eventually, I returned, but my absence did not change anything. Once again, I witnessed him fall desperately in love with someone else. It felt like a mockery, as though the universe wanted to see me in emotional agony. I pushed through it all, and eventually, a new school year began. When the new school year started, Jesse and I attempted to avoid each other in person. There was an uncomfortable tension between us after everything that had occurred over the summer. I still loved him, but he was unattainable. For context, he and his girlfriend engaged in a continuous pattern of being on and off, and I watched as he dealt with his pain, which I deeply resented. I urged him numerous times to let go, but he remained convinced that she was the right person for him. What kind of person continuously manipulates someone just to keep them around? It was not right, and I despised him for it while simultaneously loving him. Thus, I remained his friend. Eventually, September arrived, and Jesse and I were close once more. He was in one of his regular sad phases, and I recognized the issue. I persuaded him to listen, and he complied. He finally realized that his girlfriend was bringing him down, making him feel worthless and lowering his self-esteem. Ultimately, they broke up for the 5th time. This time, Jesse seemed much happier. He finally let go of what had been weighing him down, and I was genuinely pleased for him. I was still in love with him. Then, everything fell apart. Jesse asked me to be his boyfriend. Feeling foolishly in love, I agreed. However, that relationship only lasted a day. During that day, I felt like the happiest person alive. I loved him. It seemed as though all the awkward moments we had endured were finally paying off, but we ended up breaking up. Jesse resolved his issues with his girlfriend without informing me, and while I understood, he should have communicated with me. I cried when he broke the news, feeling as if I meant nothing. We had only been together for a day, yet I had harbored feelings for him for months, perhaps even a year. I needed a break from everything, but I could do little about my situation, so I remained physically close to him. I assisted Jesse with his relationship problems, a relationship that had seemed to destroy the bond we once shared. I resented her, and I resented him too. That is when the whirlwind of issues began. I felt lost and could no longer manage any of it. It started to take a toll on me. I cried quietly, far away from him. I requested space and time, but he responded with indifference. He distanced himself and acted like the victim to his friends, abandoning me when I needed him the most. For 4 months, he kept me out of his life. I cried for what felt like an eternity. Words could never articulate the depth of my experience, but I documented my feelings anyway, in case I might one day explain them. Yet, I doubt I will ever illuminate those feelings because they are steeped in a lack of emotion, reason, dignity, and most painful of all, a lack of love from him. I fully understand that life happens without a clear reason, and one must continue to move past these little setbacks. Even with this knowledge, I fell into a destructive cycle. Initially, I began drinking in small amounts, but soon it nearly led to my demise. I developed this vice to cope, never confiding in anyone about it until now, with strangers on the internet. I also engaged in self-harm for a while, but eventually stopped, realizing it wasn't helpful. However, as mentioned, 4 months passed. Earlier this year in January, he approached me shortly after winter break. At that point, I wanted nothing to do with him. I had stopped drinking, ceased self-harming, and finally let go of him. Yet, he apologized. He expressed remorse for everything he had done and for how things ended between us. He took full responsibility for what had happened, but I doubt he will ever grasp the extent of my suffering during his absence. That lack of understanding is what frustrates me most. It has been a few weeks since that conversation. Today is February 13, 2025, the day before Valentine's Day. He and I are close again, but I have established boundaries this time. I refuse to let the same mistakes repeat. I am no longer that naive person. Yet, I also recognize that he has faced his own share of difficulties. He recently broke up with his girlfriend a few weeks ago. He finally realized the point I had been trying to convey to him all along. It took seeing her neglect him when he lost his cat. She was not there to support him in his time of need, and he ultimately had enough and ended their relationship. She never truly cared for him. She only wanted to use him. This realization speaks volumes about how much he has matured since our last encounter. However, I did caution him that if he were to reconcile with her, I would end our friendship, and I am determined to uphold that promise. I do not wish to be hurt by him for allowing himself to be manipulated by her, because, despite everything, I still love him. I cannot admit that to him, as he has also changed. Everyone undergoes transformation, and at times it feels like I was just an experiment for him, like I was used to help him figure things out. He is identified as straight now, which makes me feel foolish. I suppose I am seeking an opinion, although it will likely not alter the feelings I possess for him. Story 3. Married with kids, yet my heart still belongs to my first love. After 8 years apart, I can't shake my feelings for him. WTF. Please bear with me as I share my story. This may take a while. To begin, I entered into a relationship with my ex when I was 15. It was a classic case of love at first sight, and we quickly became inseparable. Within a month, I was crafting handmade gifts for our anniversary and writing love letters constantly. Our connection was intense from the start, but insecurities plagued us and sometimes led to conflict. Both of us carried unresolved trauma from the past, which resulted in us hurting each other emotionally on numerous occasions. However, we managed to overcome these challenges together. Honestly, he was my whole world, and I was his. There was a slight age difference, leading my family, especially my father's side, to take years to accept that our relationship was serious. This alone created many complications. Regardless, being with him made every emotion feel so vivid and distinct. I truly believed he was my soulmate. To avoid turning this into a lengthy narrative, I will fast forward a couple of years. My mother was considering giving her approval for us to marry, allowing us to live together. Although I was not 18 yet, she recognized our deep love and had seen us as a couple. She understood we were sincere. Unfortunately, my stepfather at that time was struggling, which led to Child Protective Services becoming involved. When they discovered I was not staying at home, since we were not married, I was spending nights at his place. My mother became anxious. We ended up staying with my aunt for a while before moving to Wyoming to be with my grandmother. At that point, we felt no urgency to rush into marriage. Moving to Wyoming turned out to be a significant error. He was extremely unhappy there, and I began to irrationally believe that he didn't love me anymore. I gained considerable weight, which I believe contributed to my struggles with self-esteem. He spent a lot of time playing his computer games, and I started to suspect he was engaging with chat sites. To this day, I have no idea if that was ever true. He also seemed jealous of my interactions with my colleagues. Essentially, we were both discontent and allowed our insecurities to convince us that the other didn't care. One day, after a major argument, he returned home while I remained behind. We attempted to maintain our relationship despite the distance. As time passed, I found myself back with my father for a summer. My dad, quite traditional, decided against having Wi-Fi. I admit that I didn't maintain contact with my ex as diligently as I should have. I spent most of my time with my family and began hanging out with my brother's friends. We frequently faced disruptions due to my brother getting caught smoking marijuana in the house, and I would defend him, often losing my temper. In the midst of this, one of my brother's friends, whom we will call Kathy, was planning to elope with her boyfriend. We persuaded her to drive us back to Las Vegas, where it all began, and I showed up at my ex's doorstep. He was surprised, but we quickly fell back into our old dynamic. Eventually, I learned that he believed I would not return due to my lack of communication and had started seeing someone new. I sought out his new girlfriend to confront her, but somehow we ended up becoming friends. Gradually, she persuaded me that he did not love me enough, and after hearing about their experiences together, I made the decision to leave him. It was cruel and fueled by anger. That was not who I wanted to be. This decision sent me down a dark path, as he had defined my identity. My best friend and I began using drugs, leading to years of destructive behavior, including an incident where I jumped off a building. I caused tremendous pain to him. I eventually managed to quit drugs and had 2 children with someone else. I have no regrets about them. I have always aspired to be a mother. Yet, I feel like I merely went through the motions in life, doing what is expected. Throughout my relationships, I missed my ex tremendously, believing that there was no hope left for us. I felt I had caused him too much hurt, and his family would always point out our age difference when we started dating. As the years passed, my family fell apart. I soon re-established contact with my ex. After countless nights of conversation, where he expressed his heartbreak over my children with another man, he began considering putting everything behind us to be together. He hesitated for about a week to respond. During this time, I had again convinced myself of the numerous realities that would make our reunion unfeasible. We would have our families questioning our sanity, and I worried that he might resent my children for not being his. We always intended to have children together. I flipped the mental switch that I proficiently know how to flip and attempted to let him go. I started spending every day with my cousin and our kids to distract myself. In the process, I reconnected with an old friend who began to join us regularly. This quickly developed into a realization that he had strong feelings for me. I cannot pinpoint when it changed, but it certainly did. He asked me to be his girlfriend quite swiftly, and I accepted. He listened as I expressed all my fears and issues. Nothing surprised him. I began to believe that this relationship made the most sense and that I might gradually come to love him in the same way. I did start to care for him, but it was never the same as what I felt for my ex. I understood that from the beginning. Soon, I found myself pregnant once more, a situation that mirrored how I conceived my first 2 children unexpectedly and quickly, yet I adore babies and would never be disheartened by having another. A few months into my pregnancy, my great-grandmother passed away. I was devastated, and my boyfriend insisted on being there for me. He drove me and my children across the country to attend the funeral, turning it into a meaningful trip. On the way back, he proposed to me. Apparently, he had already spoken to my father about it during our trip. I was taken aback but thought it was the right move. We could find happiness. I could finally heal. Still, I never felt any less for my ex and constantly grappled with guilt for my feelings. Although my fiancé is genuinely a kind person, he simply is not my ex. No one could be. Our daughter is now 2.5, and my other 2 children are 4 and 5. Not a day goes by without me thinking about my ex, hoping that I might dream of him each night. I have continuously tried to push my fiancé away, but he remains unyielding. I recall waking up and finding my phone open to old messages between my ex and me, and I suspect my fiancé has seen them but chooses to ignore it. He seems unwilling to lose me and refuses to let me drift away. I find myself wanting to abandon everything and run back to my ex. I'm uncertain why I let my life spiral in the ways that I did. I feel like an awful person and an inadequate mother for this desire. I stay home with the children, and here's where things get even more complicated. My fiancé, the fathers of my first 2 children, and their partners all live together with the kids. It's a long story of how we arrived at this living situation, but it makes sense for the children. We function as a cohesive unit, doing everything necessary for their well-being. The kids are happy and thriving in this environment. No child wants a fractured home. Now, the dilemma weighs even heavier on me. If I leave for my ex, the kids will have to split their time between 3 households. I feel utterly lost. I recognize that the selfless choice would be to remain and endure the pain of missing my ex forever. This anguish gnaws at me, and now that I am emerging from the mental haze, I am finally processing my emotions. I cannot switch off my feelings again. I am beginning to truly feel things, and I cannot stop. No more being on autopilot. I am spiraling and realizing that I sabotaged the possibility of my happy ending by leaving my ex in the first place. However, if I pursue my happiness, I break another man's heart. My family will judge me harshly, and my children will grow up in an even more fragmented environment. Additionally, I have wounded my ex more than I can imagine, and he may have still hoped for us all this time. Yet I am aware that I cannot be a good mother if I am preoccupied with fantasizing about returning to my ex and living with him, regardless of the consequences. I am incapable of truly loving my fiancé. While I do have affection for him, it is not the same. I bound my heart to my ex, and I cannot sever that connection. It has been approximately 8 years since I last saw him, and I miss him every single day. What should I do? I wish I could simply vanish and have all who knew me forget I ever existed. I do not see a way out where everyone ends up happy. I regret being foolish and the situation I've created. I simply don't want to remain in this situation without my ex. Edit, I am fully aware that I am the problem here, believe me. I would appreciate comments that delve deeper than that. I am sharing the darker aspects of myself, and it brings me more guilt than you can imagine, so please be thoughtful and reasonable. I do not seek sympathy, nor do I wish to feel better about my decisions. I want to understand how other people perceive my situation. I want to know if anyone else has faced similar feelings. I want honesty, even if it means hearing that I am terrible. I seek it all. Please refrain from assuming I do not love my children. That would be unfair. If I truly didn't, this would not even be a dilemma. Also, I have now organized the paragraphs, so you can rest easy about that. Story 4. OMG. I hooked up with a guy, he got distant, then I accidentally went to the same house as his friend, and he sent me a door cam pic. I recently ended a long-term relationship a few months back, and briefly experimented with dating applications. I connected with one particular guy who had a great sense of humor and energy, plus we lived nearby. He added me on Instagram, and we engaged in flirtatious conversations over a few days, discussing both our jobs and personal lives. We both work in shift-related, stressful jobs. He suggested meeting up a few times, which led me to ask if he was serious about it. He subsequently invited me to his place. When I arrived, we were both somewhat awkward and reserved initially, but we soon settled in, watching television and chatting for an extended period. Eventually, we ended up kissing for a significant time, leading to a more intimate encounter. Afterward, he cuddled with me and appeared ready to sleep, while I remained wide awake. Unsure whether to stay or leave, I eventually got up to prepare to go. He noticed, let me out, and hugged me goodbye. Over the next few days, we continued to communicate, though less frequently than before. He genuinely seemed busy at this time. A couple of days later, he sent me some memes. Two stood out. The first was an acronym saying, "I'm going to care about you, understand you, make you feel appreciated." And the second pertained to being extremely shy in person. I felt slightly taken aback by the memes. They seemed quite personal, considering I had figured he was merely interested in a physical relationship, and this felt like it suggested something deeper. It's fair to say I had been under the impression that he was somewhat of a player who wasn't looking for anything beyond sex, which was acceptable to me. His messages were inconsistent, prompting me to directly ask if he was genuinely interested in seeing me again, to which he replied affirmatively, but mentioned being busy. I reached out to him 4 days after our first encounter to see if he was available. He had plans for drinks with friends, but said he would keep it light and invite me over afterward. I agreed. He even checked in to confirm my arrival at the agreed time. When I arrived, he welcomed me with candles lit in the bedroom. The pace of things quickened, and the encounter was more intense this time. Afterward, as he had plans with friends, I left. Following that encounter, he became more distant. We would have brief conversations every few days, but I found myself having to initiate them. A week after we last saw each other, he invited me over despite having been ill with a migraine for a few days. I noticed that after our initial meeting, he wouldn't kiss me much, and he preferred I leave shortly after our encounters. I assumed he was attempting to create some space between us, but I didn't mind much. I went away for a few days and saw that he had added me to his close friends list, which struck me as unusual. Upon returning from my trip, I messaged him to see when he was free, and he invited me over that night. It had been 2 weeks since our last meeting. He was quite chatty, asking about my travels, and showed increased physical interest during our time together. In the middle of our intimate encounter, he asked, "I bet you've been looking forward to this," which caught me off guard, so I inquired if he had been, to which he confirmed. Afterward, we cuddled and chatted before I left again. I didn't see him for a couple of weeks and our communication was minimal. One afternoon, I sent him a message and he offered for me to come over that night at 10, which I accepted. At 10, he confirmed I was still coming over. When I arrived, he was acting normally. The intimate experience was somewhat different this time. He had been relatively selfish in previous encounters, and I even joked about feeling left out. This time, however, He devoted considerable attention to me, resulting in a more passionate and intimate experience, which seemed to be more enjoyable for him. Afterward, he left visible scratches on my back, and I jokingly remarked that I'd have to explain them, to which he asked, "Who would you have to explain them to?" while looking directly into my eyes. There seemed to be a sense of suspicion from him, not just during this encounter but in general. He also took a while to open up during our discussions. Anyway, we cuddled and talked until around 11:30 p.m. when he mentioned needing to wake up at 5 a.m. I was shocked and questioned why he had me over so late, but he assured me it was fine, so I left. I attempted to arrange another meeting a few days later, but he was busy, and then I was preoccupied for a couple of weeks. Our dialogues occurred roughly once a week, and he seemed to be dealing with personal issues. I concluded that he was confusing and didn't show consistent interest, so I decided to give him space and focus on other pursuits. I started conversing with a few new individuals. I began chatting with a different guy from the Gold Coast, whom I will refer to as Sam, M2122. He was visiting a friend in the area for a couple of days. We exchanged jokes and discovered we had many common interests. He wanted to meet in the afternoon, but I canceled as I had an event to attend. He then suggested connecting after my event at the residence where he was staying. Just before leaving for my event, I requested the address to know where I was headed afterward. He sent me the address, and to my surprise, it was the same as the guy I had been seeing. It turned out Sam was staying with a roommate of the person I had been intimate with. They were not friends, but they recognized one another. I quickly informed Sam that I couldn't go to the house and explained my reasoning. He initially understood and was fine with coming to my place instead, but then said not to worry since the other guy wouldn't be home. Reluctantly, I agreed for the time being, as I was on my way to my event. Later, I messaged Sam to express my uncertainty about the situation and let him know I was heading home to think it through, considering canceling. He informed me that he had already left his friend and was walking back to his house to meet me. For reasons I couldn't quite pinpoint, I decided to go. Having had a couple of drinks, I figured there was no harm in meeting him, and I felt somewhat guilty about canceling on him throughout the day. Once I arrived, I found the atmosphere uncomfortable. However, he was pleasant and we engaged in great conversation. He attempted to make a move, but I was not in the mood and turned him down, explaining my discomfort before leaving. The following day, Sam checked in with me, asking how I felt about everything. He then inquired what I would do if the guy discovered I had visited him at his residence. At that moment, I received a message from the other guy. I opened it, and it was a photograph of me taken from the camera at his front door the previous night. He didn't include any text, just sent the picture. I was utterly embarrassed and unsure how to respond. I managed to laugh it off, feeling foolish for having forgotten about the camera. Sam mentioned that the guy had brought it up to him and seemed to be amused by it, so although I felt awkward about being caught, I thought to myself that it wasn't a huge deal I could still meet others. It was naive to visit the same house, but I didn't view it as problematic otherwise. That evening, since he had not replied to my earlier message, I grew concerned he was genuinely upset. I messaged him again to check if everything was all right, assuring him that it hadn't been my intention to create any awkwardness, and that I had only learned Sam was at his place after our plans were made. He quickly opened and read my messages, but there was no reply. I half expected him to delete me, but he didn't. Instead, he continued engaging with my updates. I decided to give it some time. A week later, I checked in again, asking what he was up to, but received the same non-response despite him opening and reading it immediately. For now, I've left the situation as is. In my opinion, I made an effort to clarify things, so I'm not sure what more I can do. I'm uncertain how to interpret his behavior. Initially, I thought he was entirely uninterested, but after discussing the situation with my friends, who are male, they immediately questioned whether he had shown interest in anything more than sex. They suggested he might be feeling jealous. I'm not accustomed to circumstances like this, and I've never encountered someone who sends such mixed signals, so I would appreciate any insights on whether I may have misjudged the situation or what may have upset him. Thank you in advance. In summary, I started an intimate relationship with a guy, but he sent mixed signals. He became distant after a few days, yet still wanted to see me and seemed to avoid closeness on purpose. I was fine with a casual arrangement. I then met someone else who was staying with his roommate while he was absent. He appears upset about my connection with someone new, won't communicate with me, but hasn't removed me from his contacts. What's going on here?